I'm Anne Harris. My interest in the theatre has really always involved backstage theatre, perhaps more than performance as such. And from a small child, I was theatre mad, as my mother called it, and she was not impressed, by the way. However, I was interested in making marionettes and little children's theatres and scenery, and it just all grew from there. I just loved backstage theatre, and I learnt about it and I read about it. It was inevitable that that's the path I would take. I lived with my mother and my stepfather until I was pretty well forcibly removed. It was a great relief for all. And my mother rather despaired. What is she going to do with me? At one point she said, "I wash my hands of you," and I really don't blame her for that. She felt that I should have something to, quote, fall back on. My mother had a great love of theatre, but for me to go into the theatre, that was entirely different. She felt that people like us don't work in the theatre. She totally forgot she had a very famous actor cousin, Raymond Huntley, but this was different. He was a guy. Thus, I was sent to the Birmingham College of Commerce to learn typing and all that bullshit that I was going to have nothing to do with. I went to the Birmingham College of Commerce. I hated every single minute of it. I sat there and I did nothing, and they really were bemused, but nobody said, "What's going on here?" Nobody at the college. And so I went through the program and ended up with everything as a 0 because I sat there.
Perhaps the first question you should ask yourself is, do I really enjoy doing figures? If you have a distaste for mathematics, it is not the work for you.
During the term, I felt so desperate. I went down to the stage door of the very famous Birmingham Repertory Theatre. I didn't realize when I opened the stage door that I would be greeted by an entire Restoration comedy cast in powdered wigs, crinolines. They were ranged down the stairs right near the stage door, waiting for the matinee audience to go out. They asked me, "What do you want?" And of course I stammered, "I want to work here. I'll do anything." Well, you can imagine the smirks of that one. And the stage director was sent for, and he asked me, some more questions. "What are you doing now?" And he looked at me, and everybody is listening, everybody. And he said, "Well, why don't you come back when you finish term?" And of course I fled, but I did come back. And this time I was careful not to go between performances. And they took me on as a dog's body, and I did all kinds of odd jobs. I learned a lot, and I was very happy. After the pantomime finished, I got on a train and I went to London and I looked for a live-in job. And I found one working as a waitress and where you could live in at the Hospital for Nervous Diseases, Queen Square. During that time, I had a stroke of luck. The Strand Electric and Engineering Company was looking for someone to run their demonstration theatre. And I went along, and I guess they could see that I would take it for almost no money. I did take the job for £4.10 a week. And if you wonder how you can live in London on £4.10 a week, I can tell you it's close to impossible. And I found a room in Happy Hampstead, or Happy Hampstead as it's known as. And I lived in a room with a gas ring, and I shared a bathroom with 10 people. You wouldn't want to know, frankly. But I was very happy. Eventually, it turned out that I had the opportunity to work in the evenings as well as the day at some of the London theatres because I knew the equipment. And they were desperate for people. ITV began to open up about this time, and they paid more money. And so the men tended to leave theatre work and move to television. So this was my chance. I worked at the Prince's Theatre and the Winter Garden Theatre, and eventually I got a job working the Limes at the Garrick Theatre. I worked mornings doing any repair work, setting up, being ready for rehearsals that were going on, and at night, of course, the show. But in the afternoon, I followed a dream. I had always wanted to play clarinet. My family had no money for something like this. So when I was 18 or 19, maybe 20, I had saved up and I bought a clarinet, and I would practice 4 hours every single day, either under the stage if there was nothing going on, or I would go home on the tube and practice at home and come back in time for the performance at night. So I got not too bad, as a matter of fact. Here I am backstage lugging some equipment around, and when I look many years later at this photograph, I had to laugh because I'm wearing some kind of, look like bedroom slippers and bare feet. I can't believe it. Nobody would do that now. The show that was the most fun was a French revue called La Plume de ma Tante. Here is the program. I see that it says sixpence on the back. I don't think you get a program for sixpence now. It was sort of a spoof. It was charming, the music was lovely, and the Queen came to see us. We had more than 500 performances. So that was great fun because there was lots to do. You've got to be on your toes. There were things going wrong all the time, and people swearing and carrying on. Lots of fun. I just loved that. One day I was sent for from the front of house. The request was, would I be interested? No, I don't think they even said that. I think they said, would you go on this show called What's My Line?
Overseer, undertaker, pest destroyer, boiler maker, chimney sweep and steeplejack, foreman in a copper mine, truckman, pilot, what's my line?
This show was a sensation in England. It was 8 o'clock on Sunday night. Everybody watched it. Of course, my mother and stepfather watched it and all their friends. And would I go on? The condition was I was to say I worked at the Garrick. So the What's My Line people called. They hauled me out to the BBC studios. And of course, I dressed up to go out and see them. So they looked at me and said, are you really an electrician at the Garrick? And I said, yes, I am. All right, be it so-and-so at such and such a time. That was it.
It looked a job in which you used your hands rather skillfully.
Yes.
It is then a skilled manual job.
Yes.
Is it, are you making something?
You had to guess what this person does for a living in under 10 guesses. So here I am. This is what was shown on television. Now, here I am in a lovely red Chinese silk evening dress, and on the right is Eamon Andrews. In the middle is Bob Monkhouse. These people are all gone to their heavenly home by now, of course. Also on the show was Gilbert Harding, very well known in England at that time, and Lady Isabel Barnett. So I wore this beautiful dress, and I kept it all these years because I really couldn't bear to give it away. And 62 years later, I was able to pass it down to my granddaughter, and she is now wearing that for special occasions like the May Ball in Cambridge. What's My Line was so special, as I said, and my family, of course, watched it, all their friends watched it, and suddenly, oh, Anne's in the theatre, that seems to be all right. And you know, many, many years later, I've mentioned this to some old Brit of my ilk, and they saw it, and they remembered. It's really quite special, I think. The La Plume de ma Tante was coming to an end. My great friend Mo was the principal dancer. Mo and I decided that we would have some adventure. We purchased one-way tickets on the Empress of France to Canada. We had $50 each in our pockets and no job. So the first girl to be an electrician in the West End Theatre, and perhaps in all of England for all I know, gave it up and moved on, and here I am.